Are we live?
Oh, cool.
Now we're live.
Yeah, I had a couple.
Cool.
We're ready again.
Okay, here we go.
All right, guys. Well, welcome to this additional presentation today, the last for today, for Warpstock 2024, Saturday. This is called ArcaOS in a VM. And I know that Lewis did touch upon ArcaOS really intended for bare metal installations, and which is all fine and good, but I always like to push the envelope, see what could be done, you know, in a virtual machine. So we're just going to quickly cover 4 products. I think those are the more popular options, and I felt they were worth mentioning. We have Oracle VirtualBox. Yes, I heard that. Oracle VirtualBox, Microsoft Hyper-V, VMware Workstation, and QEMU. I believe KVM has its basis in QEMU, so those should be pretty much used interchangeably. So.
I think Proxmox is based on it too.
Yeah, that is correct. Proxmox does use that. QEMU is in a lot of different things. It's an incredible product for what it is. It's a free open source software. So I did an exploration and deep dive into the virtual machine usage scenarios with ArcaOS as a guest operating system. My objective here was to measure key characteristics of compatibility with ArcaOS and see which product ends up at the top of the stack. There are reasons why an enterprise may want to virtualize ArcaOS. It could be convenience, ease of deployment, consistent results, because if you have a VM you create in a container, you could take that from one computer to another, or one server to another, and it should operate basically the same no matter where you transport that. That could certainly be advantageous. So, for the setup parameters, I understand, and David A. kind of gave me some inspiration for some of this. So when I set up and deployed ArcaOS to virtual machines, I did consider these 3 items here. So I do attempt to install with the defaults and make adjustments to the installer only whenever necessary if issues arose. I also only configured the VM to use one CPU for maximum compatibility, and I know that ArcaOS prides itself on having a rock-solid SMP implementation, but it seems like in VM land that doesn't always pan out perfectly, even in Oracle VirtualBox, which is the recommended choice. So that's what I did there. And then wherever possible, I chose virtualized hardware that would deliver the best mix of features and stability. So AC97 for audio, and then NE2000 for network hardware, or something similar to that. So, without further ado, contender number 1 in the ring, Oracle VirtualBox. So, as many of you already know, Oracle VirtualBox was originally developed by Initech, and then prior to being acquired by Sun Microsystems, and then again by Oracle. It's just, there's always a bigger fish. So, and Initech was known to be a very pro OS2 shop. In fact, VirtualBox was initially designed with OS2 as a main OS to be put into their product. And it shows up in their VM Guest Editions pack as well for OS2 and derivatives. In fact, the Oracle developed VM editions for OS2 have a copyright of like 2022, so it's quite recent, and they still update those periodically. Oracle also offers both the base product licensed under GPL2, as well as an extensions pack licensed under the PUEL, which used to be called Personal Use and Evaluation License, and then just about 2 weeks ago they changed this to Personal Use and Education License. If you are a business and install the extensions pack, some scary lawyers from Oracle will descend upon your business and haunt you with legal notices and request to pay them money. So if you're a business, just avoid the extensions pack at all costs. It's just a bad idea. These Oracle people, they are oracles. I mean, they literally can sense an IP address that comes from a business and say, wait a minute, they're not paying us licensing fees. And yeah, you're going to have problems. The good news is, though, you really don't need the extensions pack. There's nothing that it provides that ArcaOS can really take advantage of. I mean, there is I believe, an NVMe module, which, again, you don't really need that. Just stick to the SATA disks. It works just fine. So, we'll go over a couple of the results here, the good and the bad that I encountered. So in Oracle VirtualBox, at least as of version 7.1, which is the latest version as of this presentation, the install went without a hitch, and defaults could be safely selected. And I believe if you go into the more options area, where it would say modern system and vintage systems, I think there might even be an extra one for virtual machines too, if I'm remembering correctly. So it does a really good job picking sane defaults. And it was perhaps the most user-friendly experience for a setup out of all other VM products that I've tested, which is a good thing. The VirtualBox extensions, which are provided with ArcaOS in a default install, make mouse integration and shared folders easy to use. Video and audio performance was also excellent. The VGA BIOS played nicely with the Panorama driver. It had no problems there. Or was it GenGrad, one of the two, but it worked flawlessly. And ArcaOS formally acknowledged, it was formally acknowledged as an option in configuration. So when you go to create the VM, if you go to other VM products, you could type, ArcaOS and it will come up as other, or I don't know what this is. Whereas, other OS2s may come up in the list. But Oracle actually does acknowledge ArcaOS, which is also really good advertising. Some of the issues I encountered, they weren't a huge deal, but just something to consider. Mouse integration doesn't play nicely with WinOS2 sessions. It could cause the mouse to move in a jerky way. And I don't know if it has something to do with the tracking or how it does mapping one-to-one with the host mouse and with the VM. So one way to fix that is, I believe you use Control-I, and it turns off the sort of seamless integration where you would move your mouse over a VM window, and it just captures automatically. You turn that off, and then it stays in the box, but then it works beautifully. The mouse picks up just fine in WinOS 2, and you don't have that weird jankiness there. So just something to keep in mind. Also, using more than one CPU causes weird behaviors and is not recommended, like the installer. I believe when I tried to install with 2 virtual CPU cores, it seg-faulted at some point because it didn't know what to do. And David A. has noted this in the wiki for ArcaNoa. And yeah, Oracle lawyers are scary. Again, if you don't use the virtual, the extensions pack, you'll be okay. That issue will not ever be a problem.
Excuse me.
Yes?
So I think, like when I did this, I installed it with one CPU, but once it was created, then I set it up to more than one, and I haven't done a huge amount of stuff with it, but it seems to work fine.
Oh, duly noted.
In my case, it seems to work fine for a while, and after some days, some weird things starts to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I also used to say that. Oh, I just put like 3 CPUs and VirtualBox is working fine together. ArcaOS, and then I started to get some logs,
Yes,
some hanging.
everyone says that to us.
Yeah.
I don't know why you people
Yeah.
say you have to use one CPU. I use
Yeah.
multiple CPUs, it works just fine.
Interesting, I'm using 2 cores on my
Are you?
VM here, but maybe that occasional weird crash would go away.
Yeah, David A. was pretty emphatic about saying if you can, just stick to one. It seems to give you the best results.
Do you guys notice a performance difference between using 1 and 2 CPUs or 1 and 3?
No, but you get more pulse meter.
Yeah,
things.
Yeah, yes. It looks really cool on the bar when you get all these different racks. It's like
Realistically
so
speaking,
neat.
you're still, the host operating system is doing a lot of management of like optimizing what's running on the core, I suspect. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's an ego thing to see like the
Yeah,
core
exactly.
processors.
It is really cool.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I wondered if you actually saw
Yeah, I want to. Yeah.
that difference.
I
Well-
doubt it. I doubt that there's a large performance improvement when you're running it. Because there's overhead for virtualizing multiple CPUs. And that's always the trade-off
Mhm.
when you're dealing with virtualizations. How much of the host horsepower are you giving up in order to virtualize that hardware that would otherwise just give you more pure performance out of the VM?
So do you say it's okay to set up more than one CPU?
We recommend only one CPU core.
Oh.
I mean, if it works for you in your setup, on your host hardware and everything else, like Alex is using on his, That's terrific.
I'm doing that.
But if Alex had a problem with it and his machine hung, and then he opened a ticket for us and said, my machine hangs and I run two virtual CPUs in VirtualBox,
You'd say, crank
the
it.
ticket gets resolved very quickly.
Usually with
very
a
well
cutting
said.
comment by David.
Yes,
course.
exactly.
Did you read the wiki? Yes. He always stares into your soul when you ask the questions. He does it to me on the beta forum. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Yes, Sensei. All right. On to tips and tricks for Oracle VirtualBox. The default VGA BIOS is pretty good about exposing resolutions from what I can tell, but if there are screen resolutions that are not in this control panel for ArcaOS, you can add custom resolutions at the host level. There's this command, vbox manage, set extra data, and you would specify your virtual machine name, followed by custom video mode 1, and then you would specify your horizontal, vertical, and your color depth. You put that all in one string, and when you hit the return carriage, and then you go back in and boot ArcaOS back up, the video BIOS will actually expose that custom resolution. So maybe you have some weird janky screen too, that maybe a 3:2 ratio or something that Visa BIOS isn't going to intuitively detect. That can help expose that, and Panorama should just take it.
So you run that on the host machine?
Well, the command, when you're configuring your virtual machine, you'll run this command on the host side,
Okay.
not in
Yeah.
OS2 or ArcaOS.
When I was testing dynamic icons, not dynamic icons, the dynamic font scaling support, it was convenient to set up a VM in VirtualBox to do it, with a resolution that matched the native screen resolution of
Yep.
this, which is like 2560 by 1600. I had to do that.
Yep. There you go, case in point. So it's a very handy thing to keep in your repertoire. Also, if you want your cursor to work correctly in WinOS 2, specifically full screen mode, try turning off the mouse integration. Again, just a simple consideration. Takes a second, and then if you want to turn it back on, I believe you hit your host key, which for me is right control and then I, and then it makes it seamless again. Likewise, if you want to use sound in WinOS 2, you can set your sound card to Sound Blaster 16 in the VM configuration panel, and supply SB16 drivers in WinOS 2. I don't have a recommended specific driver download or anything of that nature, but there's sources online where you can just get maybe archive.org, you can get yourself a SB16 installer diskette set and pop the images in and install those, and WinOS 2 should just take that in. Now, contender 2, Microsoft Hyper-V. This is a hypervisor provided for free by Microsoft. And it has been included in some form since Windows Vista, but properly came into its own around Windows 8 or so. And it's exposed, basically you have to go into add features and it can be turned on there. And it offers 2 different modes. You have a Generation 1 VMs for greater compatibility with older operating systems that use BIOS and IDE disks. And then Generation 2 VMs for more modern features like SCSI and UEFI. However, it was not good. So, just complete waste of time. As usual from Redmond, you're going to get, it's going to be half-assed if you use anything other than Windows, which is what's really intended for. So don't even waste your time.
Yeah, the target for Hyper-V is to run earlier versions of Windows under Windows.
Right. Yeah. So, but I had to test it just in curious.
They tell you that they don't support other operating systems. They don't support running Linux under Hyper-V. They don't support running DOS under Hyper-V.
Well, there you go.
Just other versions of Windows.
Lovely. Okay.
Yes,
Well,
big help.
in that case, this tip and trick is going to be very important. Please uninstall it, and it'll save you disk space. Seriously, why waste your time with that? It's just stupid.
Is this the thing that used to be virtual PC?
Hyper-V replaced Virtual PC. It's a different.
They developed their own.
It's a totally different product. Windows, there was a Microsoft Virtual PC 2007. That's the last known version of the old Kinetics Virtual PC from way back when.
Isn't there Type 1 hypervisor version of Hyper-V that runs on bare metal, like ESXi?
There might be. I haven't explored that, so
I think there is one for commercial customers. It's like a VMware competitor, but I don't know much about it. So I could be wrong.
No, yeah, maybe something for Windows Server or something, for sure.
Comment, please.
Yes.
So on the virtual PC, so you can install it in Windows 7. It was provided so that you could run Windows XP, because I've
Yep.
got some stuff that only runs on Windows XP.
Sure.
Yeah, so, and it seems to work.
Yeah, they actually called it, they made a more pretty packaged version called Windows XP Mode for Windows 7. And it kind of took the Virtual PC 2007 engine and streamlined it into your Windows 7 install, so you could go back and forth, I guess, with different applications. But then once you got into Windows 8, by they I mean Microsoft, intentionally broke things so that Virtual PC 2007 wouldn't just install correctly. And then by Windows 10, it's completely broken to the point where you may as well just not even bother. So, but yeah. All right, next up we have VMware Workstation. This is one of the earliest commercially available virtual machine software packages on the market, starting around, I'm just going to say 1997. VMware was recently acquired by Broadcom, and all the desktop applications were made available free for personal use. So if you wanted to try the Pro version or you want to try VMware Fusion, now's your chance if you don't want to pay the money, as long as it's for personal use. And its server-hosted relative, ESXi, is quite popular among enterprises for hosting VMs over the network. So I know my current place of employment, they use ESXi for the labs, and it is a pretty robust package.
I would say an awful lot of servers, both internal servers and internet servers and so on, if they're not running on Azure or AWS and they're running in-house, they're probably running on ESXi.
Yeah, that would track. Though with Broadcom having taken over and tweaked some of the licensing, I'm not sure if that's going to be. Yeah, that's a whole can of worms. I don't know if I want to go down
Word
that.
Firestorm comes to mind.
Yeah.
I just saw an article on the Register saying that the Japanese authorities had just raided the Broadcom's office
Oof.
to investigate potential antitrust violations.
Huck Tan hiding somewhere, I'm sure.
And ESXi is on hardware.
Yeah. Yes. You bare metal install it. Yes.
It's
Correct.
not like a VirtualBox where it's running inside of a
Yeah.
host OS.
Yeah, the VMware ESXi is its own operating system.
Yep.
And how do you get to it? Is there like a native client software for something?
There's a web interface.
I know that, but is there something more like a normal, not a web browser?
Like, get to it in what sense? To run VMs on it or to manage it?
Well, both to see the VM running and to manage it, I guess.
So ESXi, you can open a remote VM from VMware Workstation or VMware Player. It acts as a front end to the ESXi
Yep.
server.
So,
There's also a standalone remote VMware console that you can get, which you launch basically from you basically pass it the URL of the VM, or you can access the VMs through your web browser.
and the penultimate one we just mentioned, that runs like on Windows and Linux, for example, or?
I think it probably runs on Linux. It certainly runs on Windows. I mean, mostly where I use it is my day job, which is a Windows-based laptop. But, but yeah, I mean, if you're curious, I can show you. I have an ESXi set up here.
Awesome. So for VMware Workstation results, there were a few things that were of note. So once fully installed, ArcaOS seemed to run quite stable. I didn't have any weird issues that I encountered, and it is usable enough in an ESXi hostable counterpart. I would imagine you would put it into the ESXi parameters, and David A. has a whole guide on the wiki about how to set that up, and it's ESXi 6.7 if I'm remembering correctly. There were a few other issues though. There are no working guest editions. Once upon a time, VMware did have OS2 editions, but this was eons ago. They had since dropped it, and they don't really acknowledge OS2, eComStation, or ArcaOS in any official capacity. Also, I had this strange situation. I didn't matter what settings I tweaked, where I adjusted, but I had extremely slow boot from the installation media, like at the phase 1 portion, where it creates the RAM disk and puts the disk images. It would take sometimes up to 45 minutes before it would initialize. It was very bizarre. Couldn't figure out why, and I tried it on different computers, and it must be a characteristic of the latest version of VMware Workstation. But a couple tips and tricks for VMware Workstation. I do recommend, if you like, retooling and trying different things in your initial setup process, do consider using snapshots after the initial setup begins if you wish to experiment with setup options. So if an option you chose doesn't work, say you changed a video driver or a network card and it's not behaving and you're like, crap, I gotta start the install over again. Well, no, now you have to start the install over again. You gotta re-spool the entire RAM disk portion, and that could take up to 45 minutes again. You might be wasting your time. So just roll back the snapshot to right when you get to the initial setup screen, and then you're in business. Since OS2 isn't an official option for when you're configuring the VM, your RAM amounts are probably going to be too conservative. I'd say it starts out with like 256 megabytes. You could certainly run ArcaOS on that, but it'd be very tight. So just be sure to bump it up to at least a gig or two.
Question?
Yeah.
Comment? There are actually updated editions for VMware on OS2 now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Where did you find those?
There were some community written ones. I don't remember who the author was.
I don't remember who it was either.
Yeah, it was.
Someone
Was it was somebody familiar? It wasn't Digi, was it? It was.
I don't think so.
Or
I don't think so.
Andre, maybe,
Was
or-
it someone familiar? I thought it was someone I hadn't heard of.
Oh, maybe not. Maybe it was just another Dimitri. I don't know. But anyway,
There are lots of them.
some of us have been testing with OS2 under ESXi, found these editions, discovered that they needed some work. So
Oh, okay.
there have been some. Was it Bankai who did the work on that one?
I think I did much of the.
That's Roger Ruin's company. They updated it a lot to add things like smoothly working clipboard support.
Oh, wonderful.
Bidirectional. So we've been testing it at ArcaNoa for reasons, capital R, but are they available publicly, or are they
Not
sort of
yet.
pending?
Okay, that makes sense because I did some of my requisite research and I didn't see anything come up.
But
so.
they will be available in some form or fashion.
Wonderful. Well, that's actually fantastic news for those that are on VMware products. So thanks for bringing that up. And now for our final contender in the ring, we have QEMU. This is an incredibly flexible emulation solution that typically appeals to more advanced users on Linux, with community builds also available for Windows and Mac OS. It can also allow for ArcaOS to be emulated on more exotic hosts that support QEMU's i386 core, like, say, Apple Silicon. If you get that core and run it, you, in theory, should be able to boot ArcaOS. And there is a vibrant community around this project, which shows its staying power and continued innovation. So I did encounter some good and bad as well with QEMU. For the good side, because of the flexibility of QEMU, I was able to fully emulate ArcaOS without many issues encountered. And it offers a very minimalist style interface that stays out of your way. It's just the window and that's it. There's no file menus or anything like that. It's pretty straightforward. And the performance is actually rather solid in my experience. Some issues encountered though. It does struggle with mouse cursor lock. So the host cursor can break free from the VM, even though it'll say at the top of the bar, it'll say click in the window to capture your cursor and then press a key combo to release. If you move your mouse quick enough, it seems to get outside the window, which is kind of strange. I'm not entirely sure. I checked on the forums and such to see if this is like a known issue. I didn't see anything that would lend to that. But
You
again,
just have superhuman mouse speed.
yeah, I guess so. Could be a high DPI mouse.
Wouldn't it be a known feature?
Oh, say what?
Wouldn't it be a known feature?
Yeah, it could be a feature. Yeah, just quickly, got to get out of here. Yeah, move fast enough. Also, using the emulator does require some command line foo, and I know that's some folks are allergic to command line foo, so so some assembly is required. And again, no formal guest editions that I could see in my research. Again, Lewis alluded to this too. There's no formal support for KVM as well, and that QEMU has that as its basis. So, some tips and tricks for QEMU. If you are looking for a simplified experience using QEMU, like a more of a front end, you might want to consider something like Vert Manager or one of several community developed front ends that do exist. But do note that the quality can vary with them. I'd say it could be kind of a crapshoot. And if you do prefer to stick to the command line, consider perhaps saving your QEMU startup parameters in a shell script on Linux or in a batch or CMD file on Windows to help simplify your process. You could just click and run, and then it passes those commands straight in the background. And mouse escape from the VM seemingly was mitigated when running in full screen mode because there's nowhere to escape if the entire screen's taken up. So, there's that. So, in conclusion, the winner of this experiment clearly is Oracle VirtualBox, hands down, namely in the following areas. It has the officially supported guest editions, which I think they work great right out of the box, and ArcaOS even has it as an installer option there. It says Oracle VirtualBox, which is nice. It also had a remarkably smooth setup experience, and yeah, the extensions pack provide the fully featured experience. So I'd say for now, definitely consider your Oracle VirtualBox for any kind of virtualization of ArcaOS if that's something you're really aiming for. I know it tends to get a bit of a bad rap in some communities because Oracle has its hands in there, but again, if you just stick to the base product, you don't use the extensions pack anyway, you'll have a perfectly fine time with it, and I think the performance is good, and it's definitely worthwhile. Other VM products from VMware, Broadcom I should say, and Microsoft either had varying degrees of support or outright failed to work. VMware Workstation ESXi still do have a use case if your enterprise already has licenses and wishes to continue to utilize them, especially if you want a way to remotely connect to an ArcaOS instance over the network. And now that I know that there are guest editions possibly coming out soon, that's going to add another check mark to that list. So that's good. But at this very moment, I would just say don't expect the best user experience. It's a little bit varied. Your mileage may vary. And that's all I have for today for this presentation. Did anybody here or anyone in the chat have any questions? David.
Yeah, well, just a couple of things, like what about in each of these USB support? Do they all provide that?
Yes, great question. So what's actually really cool, I believe it was VirtualBox 7.0 that introduced XHCI support into the base product. It used to be that you had to install the extension pack to get, even I think USB 2 might have been behind that as like sort of a differentiator between the two, but Oracle has decided to just port all of XHCI into the base product, so you don't need the extensions pack anymore.
And then what about shared folders? Are those provided on all of these?
Yes, I did test shared folders in Oracle VirtualBox. That did work. I didn't see, because there were no extensions available for other, or guest editions rather, for the other products I mentioned, there weren't shared folders at least easily able to be configured like it was with Oracle VirtualBox.
And then in terms of the networking, like I realized when I changed my machine's networking setup on VirtualBox to be a, what did you say it was, Alex?
NAT.
Not NAT, it's,
I'm sorry, what was the question?
there's 4 choices for the way the networking
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. NAT, bridged,
Bridge, that's what I
host.
used.
Yeah.
So that the addresses were visible outside of the VirtualBox. 'Cause
Yeah.
with the default one, I couldn't get to the
Mhm.
machine.
right.
Yeah, okay. And what, could you actually Can you explain what those 4 choices are? Or is that out of the venue of this?
Yeah, I'm not actually, personally, I'm not like a network guru. I do know that network address translation, it's supposed to create an address, like virtually, whereas like bridged attaches to a physical network, whether it's a NIC or a wireless LAN, and assumes that connection, through the host.
I mean,
So.
I could give you a brief course on it, but it would probably take a
Yeah,
while.
okay, that's all right.
That's
The
a-
bridge thing worked good, because it was 2 separate IP addresses.
That's a dinner discussion or a tomorrow post-event
Yes.
discussion.
All right. Noted.
Yeah, I would not do the topic justice in just a few minutes for sure. Yes, and I believe you had a question.
So I'm thinking back to something that the Russian computer programmer who helps me mentioned. He manages a bunch of servers for dental practices in Boston, and he uses this ESPX thing. I think it is.
Oh, ESXi, yeah.
So, but he told me that it's very expensive to use their software.
Yes.
But he said you can get the thing to run the servers, and somebody has written another front end, which you can just download from the internet. And so he showed me he's got three computer screens, and he can just sort of bring up all the servers and look at them. They're all virtualized in a rack in his little storefront in Harvard Square.
Now,
And so he said that's the workaround. You don't have to pay him the money.
Right now, it's actually I'm glad you brought that up, because I know that ESXi at one point, or VMware at one point, had a free branch of the product. Now, once Broadcom took over, it's like they flipped things on its face. The desktop apps are free to get you into the ecosystem, but the ESXi product is completely paid only. So even with that trick you mentioned, you still have the server part that you'd still have to also pay a license for. And I would imagine Broadcom has convoluted the license terms even further to make it so that even if you could do something like what you mentioned, it might not be tenable in a legal situation, because I'm sure they'll say, no, you need to put one with the other officially. But just a thought.
I think if you already have a free license, the ESXi, they're not taking that away. I don't think they can.
No.
They're not allowing anybody else to get them.
Right, correct.
I read that Broadcom's gotten into a lot of hassles in a lot of different domains.
Yes, they are a painful company to deal with, from what I've been told.
Yeah. Oracle, the same thing happened to me with Oracle when they took over DYN. I was paying $20 a year for my DDNS servers, and now it's $100 a year, and the service is worse.
Of course. Yeah, I heard a joke somewhere where it's like, if you look at the hierarchy of Oracle, it's made of 5% engineers and 95% lawyers. So that kind of tracks with what you're saying.
That's what happened to HP.
Yeah, right. Any other questions?
There is an experiment I always wanted to do with VirtualBox. Maybe we can do it in the future. A VirtualBox has a way to create a guest with UEFI support. So
Yes.
I always wanted to see if we can take the latest version of ArcaOS and try to run it on a virtual machine with UEFI. So
And that's
UEFI
actually
support.
great that you brought that up. I actually did test that,
Yeah.
and it didn't seem to recognize or start up at first. So it seems like it works best if you stick to BIOS mode. Which is, in this case, it's the defaults anyway. When you go to configure and you pick ArcaOS, it's going to do that, and it works just fine. I'm sure maybe it's something. I'm not sure if it has something to do with the UEFI implementation in VirtualBox or something with the ISO. But when I tried to boot it, it wouldn't even register. It doesn't even show up on the list, which seems counterintuitive, but it could just be something that was overlooked when that UEFI specific to VirtualBox is developed. I'm not an expert in that domain, so I can't further comment further. But again, I'd say stick to the defaults. They work just fine.
How much memory do you allocate? I gave it 4 gig.
Yeah, I do one or two. Honestly, for my purposes and for testing, that's plenty for ArcaOS. It's I mean, when you think about it, ArcaOS's extensions, they do take up some resources, if you want to call it that, but compared to a modern operating system like Linux or Windows, and ArcaOS is modern too. I must be very clear when I say that. But other modern OSs, it's very, very conservative in its resource consumption compared to those. So that's a testament to the low footprint and the tight coding there. So, yeah.
On VirtualBox, with the share folders, do you have like a WordPress integration to copy files?
So, yeah, I didn't notice the ability to say drag from the host and drop directly into the VM, but I do see like a mounted folder, or like a directory. It looks like a drive letter that is for the shared folders.
Yeah, but you can open up and drag the file there.
Yes, and then you can go both directions. So you could drag a file into that mounted drive in the VM, and then I can go into the host, whether it's Windows, Linux, or whatever, and
you
see
file.
it. Yep,
Okay.
correct. I know some of the other VMs tend to allow you could just drag into the VM window itself, and it would pick up, but that doesn't seem to be a thing. Oh, go ahead.
By the way, one tip that I didn't see on your slide, but
Yeah.
has been kind of driven home to me recently. When setting up ArcaOS or any version of OS2 in a virtual machine, and you are setting up a virtual CD drive on it,
Mm-hmm.
don't attach the CD drive to the slave on an ID drive.
Yes.
Always make it the master on its own ID controller.
That's a great call out, and I believe David A. does mention that as well in the wiki, because performance is horrible when you use
It's
it.
not just performance, it will crash.
Okay, all right.
And it will probably crash when you are trying to install it.
Right, there you go.
There used to be many conflicting anecdotal reports of the best configuration for VirtualBox. Oh, you have to use AHCI. Oh, don't use IDE. The AHCI driver's ready to go. And David actually took the time to A/B all of that stuff. I mean, he took an inordinate amount of time to actually test and get empirical data as to which disk device performed best, provided the best throughput in the VM, and hands down it was Dan over using the AHCI drive.
Is that what's installed by default when you're installing in a VM? Do you know? I don't really pay much attention to it.
They may have changed the default for ArcaOS on my recommendation at the time to AHCI, because we thought that AHCI was better. I don't know. Do you remember?
I believe it was SATA for the hard disk, but then ID for the CD-ROM, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, and that would be my fault.
Okay, well, thank you.
It still works. I mean, again, the defaults, again, I set it to one CPU, and Core left everything else fine, and it worked. So maybe.
You can't change it, right? Like,
Yeah.
once it's set up?
Well,
Once it's set up, you can't change it because you've essentially created a virtual
Yes.
SATA disk or virtual IDE disk.
yes, right. And then
But
the
it-
drivers too.
But AHCI is SATA, right?
AHCI is
It's
SATA.
just not the Danny driver, so can you switch the drivers?
If you tell VirtualBox to virtualize a SATA controller,
Right,
that would by definition load the OS2 AHCI driver in the VM. If you then took the virtual disk that you would attach to that virtual SATA controller
mm-hmm.
and said, no, make that an IDE controller,
That wouldn't work.
no, because
I understand that, but the choices between AHCI and Danny, isn't that right? These are two different SATA drivers, right?
correct.
So, and you can't you
Well,
just
they're
change
two
it?
different. Danny will run some SATA controllers.
Uh-huh.
It's an IDE controller. So if it's an IDE controller that also does SATA interfaces, then Danny can run it. For instance, the IDE controller in the T43 is actually a SATA controller. And there's a SATA PATA bridge on the board that creates a parallel, a PATA interface for disk drive. But it's really a SATA controller. Danny runs this. That's not always the case.
I'll
But
look at mine and see what.
in VirtualBox, it's pretty black and white. If it's IDE, that's Danny. If it's SATA, that's OS2AHCI.
Okay.
There is another thing that I think is useful, is to create an OVA file, OVA,
Okay.
and well, yeah, you can install the virtual machine and create that file for you to have it like as a backup and move it to some other machine. But it's interesting to create like an empty virtual machine with the settings that are the ones that works for ArcaOS, and share that empty
Like a template.
yeah, like a template that you double click and you create the virtual machine like on the specifications that you like, and then you install ArcaOS on it.
Sure.
Yeah, it's empty, and so it's very useful. We used to share it on the forum, like some idea. We put some OVA files there to test it out, but we never like say, okay, this is the final one, let's upload it to Hubs. Yeah, we never reached that point yet.
Right. Huh, that's actually a good idea.
Yeah.
I got the impression from Neil that he has reservations about running ArcaOS in a virtual machine on Windows and Linux.
Neil sells hardware.
Yeah, his business
Yeah.
model is
Yeah.
selling you the laptop that has ArcaOS.
Okay.
It's good, yeah.
So Louis, mine has an IDE control.
All right.
There's another question,
Would
sorry,
that
but
Yeah,
it's
sure.
more for Alex.
That would
Yeah.
be-
If
then
he
you would
knows
use the damn-
about these
Well, in the
Yeah.
those machines, oh, those are all working.
these
Yeah, I'm in the
VMware
VirtualBox,
guest add-ons,
but not in
if they're
my
going to
virtual
support
machine.
things like
Correct.
4K resolutions,
What
but
you can
I don't know if you know something about that. Or,
That's a video driver issue, not
yeah,
a,
it's
not
not
a.
it's not a more than a guess, no.
What you
Okay.
can do is.
And David A is on the IRC,
Oh.
You can.
And he
Okay,
says-
correct my mistakes.
and he said, yeah, he says changing an IDE disk to an AHCI disk in VirtualBox works just fine, and vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, you can change the actual hardware,
In the
virtual hardware.
IDE
Yeah.
I think Lewis's point was you can't simply change the driver without changing
Right.
the virtual
Yeah.
hardware.
Like when you install, in the first phase of install, you actually determine which disk controller driver you want to install. I don't imagine that ArcaOS is just going to install the other drivers just in case. So
Or you install the virtual machine with the two drivers,
Given that.
and then
I mean, you could do that.
and then well, now I'm going to switch to SATA and
Yep.
remove the other one, and it should work or something. or
maybe,
that.
but there might be a situation too where you have to go into your INI files and switch what are the default drivers. I have not tested that, so I don't know. But I don't really recommend it.
Okay.
If the stock configuration works, I would say just leave it as is.
That's good. Any other question?
Any other questions from the audience?
There's no Danny driver that loads OS2AHCI.
I think we're good now.
I think we're good. Thank
All
you
right.
very much. Thank you.
PAE.
Thank you. That's all for today.
On the system.
Programmable address